discovered my boyfriend was cheating, left without telling him I was pregnant. Now, 7 years later, he's demanding full custody of our son. I, 28 female, have a 7-year-old son, Jack. His dad happens to be my ex-boyfriend, Zach, 28 male, but I never told him about the pregnancy. Zach and I got together in college, and after we graduated, we got an apartment together and lived there for a while. He and I were pretty serious about each other, at least I was. I'm not sure about him anymore. I tried to talk to him about marriage once, and less than a month after that, I found out that he had texted his ex and actually complained to her about how clingy I'd become. He told her that he needed a break from me, and so they made plans to go on a romantic trip together. I had only found out about all of this because she had replied to one of his texts at night while he was asleep, and I saw the notification. He changed his password, but I knew what it was, so I unlocked his phone, checked out the texts from his ex, and uncovered weeks' worth of exchanges between them. They were either talking about how stressed out he was with me, or flirting like nobody's business. I was shattered when I found out and cried myself to sleep because I was completely head over heels in love with him at the time. We had been together for almost 3 years by then, so I thought that marriage was the next logical step, and that he'd be okay with me discussing it. I didn't intend on getting married that very second, but I just wanted to make sure that it was on the cards for him at some point, like it was for me. I wanted us to be on the same page, but unfortunately he was reading a whole other book. It was just that one night that I allowed myself to cry, but from the next day, I pretended as if nothing was wrong, and behaved perfectly normally, so he wouldn't get the hint that I knew about his cheating. He was supposed to go on that trip with his ex a few days after I found out, and I planned to stay with him for those few days. Then, while he was away romancing his ex, I'd leave without a word or an explanation, and cut ties with him for good. And that's exactly what I did. I waited out those couple of days, even though it was really hard to bring myself to stay with a man who I knew had no love or respect for me. But I didn't want to confront him about the cheating. I just wanted to leave without even a goodbye because I knew that would hurt him infinitely more. He told me he was going away on a business trip for the company, even though at the time both of us were just starting out and neither of our jobs required us to travel much. But I didn't ask any questions and just wished him luck. After he left, I packed all my things up in just one day and moved out. I'd already paid off half of the rent for the month, and I moved back home with my parents. I had a friend who lived in a different state, so I talked to my friend, told her everything, bought a one-way ticket to her city, and moved in there. I talked to my employers at the office, and thankfully, they let me continue working remotely until my notice period was up. In the meantime, I found a job there and got my own apartment. It took me a couple of weeks, but my friend was really helpful and was there with me every step of the way. Zach wasn't able to contact me after I left because I did everything in my power to prevent it. I changed my phone number, blocked him everywhere, and even told my friends and family about it so they wouldn't make the mistake of talking to him. I had a couple of friends who lived in different states, so even if he wanted to find out where I was through trial and error, he wouldn't have been able to. I highly doubt he'd even want to find me again. But I still wanted to make sure he couldn't, even if he wanted to. I didn't want to be found, and I thought that moving away from him and cutting him off would mean that I'd never have to see him or think of him again. That was until I found out that I was a couple of weeks pregnant. It was only a few weeks after I'd settled into my new apartment that I realized I'd missed a cycle, so I took a pregnancy test. The result was positive, and since that was the first positive thing that had happened to me in a while, I decided to keep the baby. It's been the best decision of my life ever. Despite whatever is happening right now, I still strongly believe that my son was my good luck charm because, after I found out that I was pregnant, my life took a turn for the better. I loved my job, I made a couple of new friends in the city who showed me around and were of great help to me, and I just felt better after finding out about the pregnancy. I did hear from a couple of my friends back home that Zach was searching for me like crazy, and they even asked me if I wanted to tell him about the pregnancy. But I refused because I wanted to stick to my resolution of leaving without a goodbye. He didn't deserve any closure, and he absolutely didn't deserve to be a part of my baby's life, which I know he'd try to do if he found out about it. So, I never told Zach about the pregnancy, and even though a lot of people disagreed with my decision, I stuck to it. They also had the decency to not go on and tell him about it without my consent. That has lasted for 7 years, and now my son's in 2nd grade. I'm working in a good position in the same company that I started out at, and I've been in a relationship for a year now with my boyfriend Mike. He's a banker and a way better man and human being than my slimy ex. It was all going so well for me until 3 days ago when Zach turned up at my door with a legal notice demanding full custody of my son. I was shocked to see him here because I've been very careful to cover up my tracks. And before I could even process that he was right in front of me, he'd shoved the papers toward me. I received an even bigger shock. Because I'd never even imagined this happening. This was the stuff of my nightmares, and it was happening. He told me that I could think about what I wanted to do now. I could either be prepared to fight it out in court, or just be a decent human being for once and give up custody of Jack so he'd have a better life. Then, he left without saying anything, and I just stood there in shock for another 10 minutes. Luckily, my son was in school when Zach came by, so he didn't see his dad and didn't ask any awkward or difficult questions. It's been 3 days, and I still haven't told any of my friends about it, nor have I thought about what the hell I'm going to do now. I obviously know that what I did in the past wasn't the most ethical move, but it's been 7 years, and my son's been living with me. He's never even known his father, so I don't think any court is going to take away custody from me. But I still can't help but feel afraid. I've only told my boyfriend about this, and the discussion I had with him was especially hard on me because I had to tell him the truth. Earlier, I'd just told him that Jack's father had never wanted to be a part of Jack's life, and so I was a single mother. But now, I had to confess to him that I'd never actually asked Zach if he wanted to be a father or not. I just left after I found out that he was cheating, and didn't even bother to correct myself after I found out that I was pregnant and that he'd actually been searching for me. Mike was a little upset that I lied to him about this, but he understood that these things were very painful for me to talk about, and I would have told him in due course of time. Just not right now because I wasn't ready to let him in on what had happened to me in the past. He was kind to me about that aspect, but he didn't mince words when it came to what I'd done to Zach. He said that it had been especially cruel of me to deprive him of the chance of being a father on purpose, even after I got to know that he'd been looking for me after I left. It was horrible of him to cheat on me, but that still didn't excuse what I'd done, because I'd made sure that I kept him away from his son for almost a decade. And he never would have found out either if someone didn't snitch on me. I'm still trying to figure out who'd do such a horrible thing to me, and now I'm just really confused about whether what I did was right or wrong. I know it was unethical and kind of messed up, but to be fair, so was cheating on me. That wasn't fair to me, and what I did wasn't fair to Zach, so I think it's even for us. But Mike doesn't agree, and thinks that I owe Zach a huge apology. He believes that I need to apologize and hope for joint custody at best if he does. But I'm not sure if that's the only way out of this. I don't think he has any legal right over my son, because he's never been involved in his childhood. Granted, he was never given the opportunity to do so, but there's a good enough reason for that as well. It's just all messed up right now, and that's why I'm here on Reddit right now, because what I think I need is a fresh perspective. So, AITA for never telling my boyfriend that I was pregnant and leaving him without an explanation after I found out that he'd been cheating on me? Update 1. Hey guys, it's been a week since Zach showed up, and I've come to find out a couple of things since then. This is going to be a bit of a lengthy update, because there are a lot of things that I have to talk about. First and foremost, I'm not giving up custody of my son, not even partial custody, because Zach really doesn't deserve it. I know the comment section on my original post was pretty divided on whether what I did was all right or not. But I've decided I'm going to focus on the people who believe that it was totally justified in light of what Zach had done. He cheated on me, and not just with anyone, he cheated on me with his ex-girlfriend, whom he'd been with just before he'd started dating me. They'd only been together for a couple of months, and had broken things off when Zach realized he just wanted something casual. Then, 4 months later, he started dating me. So, for him to throw away a 3-year relationship for a fling that didn't even last 6 months was very insulting to me. Not just that, it was wrong on every conceivable level for him to lie and call me clingy, needy, and heavily emotionally dependent on him and whatnot. He'd said a lot of these things while complaining to his ex about me in the texts, and I still distinctly remember all of it. None of these things were true in the slightest, but he just said it anyway to gain sympathy from his ex so she'd hook up with him. I'd only ever asked him about his thoughts on getting married, because I wanted to make sure he wanted it at some point in the future, and I think after 3 years of being together, it's okay for me to ask. But the way he freaked out after that was a clear indication that he wasn't ready for anything. If he wasn't even ready to commit to me, then I really don't think he'd have agreed to commit to a baby. Honestly, at the end of the day, I was in no way legally obligated to tell him I was pregnant. Maybe it was unethical, but it was what I had to do to lead a good life, and I don't see anything wrong with it. If he'd been a good, decent man and not cheated on me, then we probably still would have been together and had a kid together. But he chose to screw things up for himself and cheat on me, so now neither does he get me, nor does he get his son. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I know that I did what was best for me, and I refuse to feel guilty about it. I've also found out who was the one who leaked my information to Zach, and it's none other than my mother. I was shocked, but when I finally told her about Zach showing up at my door, she admitted to telling him without me even having to prompt her. I wasn't even going to accuse her because I really didn't think that my mother, of all people, would do such a thing. I just called her up 2 days ago for advice and to talk to her in general, since we hadn't spoken in a while because she seemed too busy. Now, I know she wasn't busy, but she was avoiding me on purpose out of shame. She told me that she'd contacted Zach after a friend of hers had told her that he had been promoted to vice president of the company he used to work at. Her friend happened to know Zach's mother, so they were connected like that. And for years after I left, Zach would try to reach out to my mother, but she kept her mouth shut and avoided him. But this time, she reached out to him without even asking me. And her reason to finally let him know about his baby was that she thought I wouldn't be able to handle the cost of raising a son on my own as time went on, and that Jack needed his dad to be in the picture now that he was getting older. She didn't consult with me first because she knew I would have hated the idea of that, so she just went ahead and did whatever she thought was right. I couldn't believe it, and I still cannot bring myself to believe that my own mother would do something like this to me. She knew how torn up I was after Zach's cheating episode, and how long it took me to move on from that. She insisted that she'd done this for my own good, and that I'd thank her later, but when I told her that because of what she'd done, Zach was now demanding full custody, she had no defense for herself and just went silent. I'm not as rich as Zach right now, that's something I cannot deny. I did a fair bit of stalking after my disastrous phone call with my mother and found out that he was now married to his ex, so he could commit to people who are not me. He's doing well in his life, and he lives in a nice house and seems pretty well off in all aspects. That's really good for him. But I'm leading a nice life on my own, and I don't think I need anyone's help, especially Zach's help, after I rejected him so long ago and haven't even spoken to him in 7 years. I don't know what possessed her to screw me over like this, but I know that I'm never ever going back to speaking to my mother again. I just cannot, because what she did to me was immensely disrespectful. She just assumed that I would appreciate the help and told Zach my whereabouts without even thinking about the consequences. I'm lucky that Zach's just a slimy, entitled douchebag and not a psycho or something, because then my mother's decision to tell him everything would have cost me a lot more. I've blocked her everywhere, and I'm not planning on unblocking her anytime soon, or maybe even ever. As for the custody case, I honestly don't think he stands a chance because it's been 7 years and my son's been just fine without him. At most, he can probably get visitation rights, or maybe even partial custody if his lawyer is great. But I really don't think he'll be successful in getting full custody at all. And he has nothing on me either. I can accuse him of cheating, which is why I left and never told him about Jack, but I've never demanded any child support or anything. So he has nothing on me. I even have all the pictures of his conversations with his ex back from when I first found out. I've never used them back then. But I'd taken photos just in case I ever needed them, or if I maybe wanted to expose him at some point. I never used them, but they're going to come in handy now. I've been in talks with a lawyer for a couple of days, and we're going to respond to the custody petition soon. Mike isn't happy about any of this, but he knows that ultimately it's up to me what I want to do, and he can't change that. If I'm being honest, I'm also reconsidering my relationship with him because his morals are kind of really different from my own, and I think he's not taking this as well. He's not been supportive at all, and has actually been really distant and weird about all of this. I don't know what it is, but just something about the way he's been acting is really off-putting for me. So I might be rethinking this whole relationship right now. Update 2. Hi, so Zach and I are going to meet with a court-appointed mediator first for the custody case. We're meeting the day after tomorrow, and to say that I'm stressed out would be a huge understatement. I've talked to Jack about all of this, and he's a little confused because, so far, he believed that I'd never been in touch with his father. Of course, I've never told my son the truth about why his dad's not a part of his life. But whenever he'd ask, I'd just tell him that we left him behind and reassure him that if his father had ever known him, he would have loved him, but unfortunately he never found out. That was satisfactory for him, and he wouldn't push more. I intended to tell him about who his dad was and the real reason behind his absence in our lives on his 16th birthday, when he was old enough to make a call on whether he wanted Zach in his life or not. But I guess I'm going to have to mentally prepare him for this right away, just in case this goes to court and he's dragged into it. So far, Jack knows that his father is back, and he wants to spend time with him because, of course, I can't tell a 7-year-old what custody means. I don't know what's going to happen, but I guess he'll be allowed to have supervised visits for a while. I'll have to put up with that for the sake of the case. I just hope Jack doesn't take too much of a liking to his father, because I really cannot afford to lose the little guy. It's selfish, I know, but I just cannot do this, especially when I know how hard I've worked to have the life I want and give my son the life he deserves. Zach cannot just swoop in and take it all away from me. My mother has been trying to contact me for days now, but I'm not responding to any of her calls and texts. She's been using my dad's number to contact me when he's not around because she knows that I'm not going to block my father. He's been great, really supportive, and has even said that he was very upset about what my mother had done. They've been fighting for a while now because my dad's upset with her and she thinks what she did was for the best. The last time we called, my dad said he was getting sick of her, so he was thinking about moving in with his brother for a couple of days until he felt ready to come back or something else. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he was hinting at leaving my mother, and I really don't know how to feel about that. They're my parents and have been married for more than 30 years, so I feel kind of guilty, but I know I don't need to. It's just that there's a lot of fighting and toxicity in the air right now, with my parents fighting, Mike and I growing apart slowly, and Zach coming back with a lawyer to take my son away from me. Everything's just in a really messed up place for me right now, relationship-wise, which just sucks. Update 3. So Mike and I broke up. It's been 1.5 weeks since the last update, and today we finally had the talk. He'd been acting all weird and distant the past few days ever since I told him that I wouldn't be apologizing to my ex or giving him custody, and he didn't take that well. I did apologize to Mike for lying about Zach's history with me, because I'd never told him that I'd been the one to hide my pregnancy and my baby from him on purpose after he cheated. But apart from the lying bit, I don't think I had anything to apologize for. So had he broken up with me for lying, I wouldn't have had any issues. But he told me that he couldn't bring himself to be with a woman who had no morals. All because I didn't give my cheating ex the opportunity to be a father after finding out that he'd been trying to hook up with his ex behind my back. That wasn't cool, and what could have been a civilized discussion turned into a really nasty fight, which ended with him storming out after calling me a manipulative bee. But at least it's over now and I don't have to deal with him. The custody meetings are going well, and by well, I mean they're working in my favor, which I'm really happy about. We've met twice so far, and in the first meeting itself, it was established that I had my reasons not to want Zach around me and my unborn baby. Thanks to all the cheating and the things he'd said about me behind my back to his now wife. So, it's been agreed upon that what I did back then can't be held against me moving forward. Of course, I wouldn't mind if Zach got visitation rights or something. So we've all agreed that he can meet Jack a couple of times a month, but they're all going to have to be supervised visits. And it has to be on my terms, since I'm his primary parent at the moment, and have been since he was born. The process isn't over yet, so I'm still yet to see what's going to happen ultimately. Zach can still cancel all of this and take things to court if he wants to, but I don't think he will, since after the first meeting where I brought up the cheating, he did approach me afterward to apologize to me. He told me that he was young and stupid, and that mentioning marriage had just really freaked him out, which is why he did what he did, and that he was really and truly sorry about it. I forgave him because it's really water under the bridge at this point. I'm happy, and so is he, and right now, what matters to me the most is my son's happiness. I don't want him to grow up and resent me for not letting him have a relationship with his father, even when I had the chance to. Zach's told me that he and his wife have no kids of their own, and as soon as my mother told him about me and Jack, his first thought was to get pissed off. But now that he's seen me in person, it's not that easy for him anymore because he doesn't want to take away my son from me either, knowing that I've raised him all on my own. So we were verbally able to agree on the fact that we were going to put our personal differences aside and do what was best for Jack. Hopefully, by the next meeting, everything will be finalized because I just want to let the past go happily. Update 4. Hey everyone, first things first. Zach and I have been able to work out an arrangement where he and his wife fly out here to meet Jack and spend some time with him a couple of times a month to build a relationship with him. Once he's a little older, we can rethink the custody arrangement. Both of them were incredibly thankful to me and wouldn't stop sending me thank you cards and gifts since I finally unblocked them. I figured since we were going to have to be parents to Jack now, we might as well do a good job at it. We're not friends, but CO parenting is a job that's going to need us to cooperate, and we need a good relationship for this to work. We're living in 2 different cities currently, so it's going to be a little difficult. But maybe by the time we have to go over the custody arrangements again, I'll have moved back home. I'd come here to escape my past, but now I guess I'm ready to go back because I have nothing to run away from anymore. It all sounds dramatic, but it's true. As for my parents, no points for guessing, but yeah, they're getting divorced. Good for my dad, honestly. My mother always had been a bit of a control freak, and that had led to some problems in their marriage earlier as well, but never at this level. I guess all's well that ends well, but even then, what my mother did was just not acceptable. I'm hoping for a quieter life now, and I'm sure I'll get it because my conscience is clear. And everything that was in the past has been left where it belongs.